Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Farmhouse Witch YouTube channel. My name is Bonnie if you don't know me, and today we're going to talk about the fundamental basics of witchcraft and how to approach learning witchcraft. Now I'm gonna back up really quick and give you some information on myself just so you get to know me better and you can decide if this channel is gonna be right for you. So I've been practicing for over 12 years at this point, but my background is also in education. So my bachelor's degree is in English education on the secondary level. I've taught middle school, I've taught high school, and then my master's degree is in English education, specifically adult education. Now the reason that I mention my degrees is not to like brag, it's just to let you guys know where I'm coming from. I do have maybe some hot takes. I don't know if they're hot takes. To me, they're not. I have some firm opinions on learning witchcraft, and those are obviously going to be present in this video, but I want you to understand where I'm coming from as somebody who has taught. I'm going to break up this video into sections, and I'll try to put the sections down below as well, so I'll timestamp it, and if you just want to fast forward to something, you can go ahead and look at that. This video is going to be a little bit more geared towards beginner witches, but as always, anybody and everybody is encouraged to join the conversation down below. I'm gonna look down at my phone for a second, so if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing. But I have a list here of topics that I want to cover, so I'm just gonna read them off so you know what you're expecting from this video. In the first half, I'm gonna try to quickly cover the difference of witchcraft and the overlap with the occult and New Age. I'm going to talk about common sense, media literacy, discernment, spiritual psychosis, scammers, fake titles, biases, trauma, and then in the second half of the video I'm going to focus more on actually learning at your own pace, the learning pyramid, which is kind of a deep dive, we'll get into that in a little bit, and then of course work and research. Alright, with all of that aside, the first thing that I want to talk to you about is that witchcraft by itself is a practice, it's not a religion. So when you're new and you're coming into witchcraft, there's so much overlap that this has to be a separate video. Like, I can't go over this in this video because it's just gonna be so long. But in general, there's so much overlap between witchcraft and the occult work in general, religions like Wicca, you have paganism thrown into the mix, you also have New Age, like spirituality, and I like use like air quotes when I say that, not to be demeaning, but there's a lot of whitewashing Eastern culture that goes into our version of spirituality. And the problem is that when you're new, you don't necessarily automatically know the differences between all those things, and they can kind of bleed together, which can be very confusing. So the first thing that I want you to understand though is that witchcraft is a practice, just like I said before. It's not a religion. Can you be religious and practice witchcraft? Sure you can. Nobody can tell you what you can and can't do. In our space, there are Christian witches, there are Buddhist witches, there are pagan witches, there are also atheistic witches in our spaces, so honestly, it just depends on you and your belief system. Alright, the second topic I'm going to talk to you about is media literacy, and I have learned from experience as somebody who has taught high school and who has taught middle school within the last couple of years. Media literacy for younger generations is almost non-existent. And I think a lot of that has to do with this generation growing up with technology. They don't necessarily have the skills to vet what is true, what is not true, what's a good resource and what's not a good resource. To talk about this a little further, I'm going to throw a little card up on the screen and go over some things with you. So this graphic is by Chris Drew, who is a PhD, and it's from 𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒔𝒔 if you want to go look for it yourself. Now, our definition of media literacy just refers to your ability to approach media sources with a critical and discerning eye. And when I say media sources, we're talking about YouTube, we're talking about TikTok, we're talking about anything that involves social media. All right, and now is our cue to be immature for a minute and laugh at the fact that the way that you can check a source to find if it's credible is use the CRAP framework. And yes, I said crap because it helps you find out if something is a load of crap or not. We're going to start out with the C, which is credibility. And you might remember your English teachers teaching you about ethos, logos, and pathos. Credibility refers to the ethos of somebody. So that's their credentials, right? Their credibility within a community. Keep in mind, nowadays, anybody can publish a book. Even AI can write books and publish them, right? Anybody can publish a video. So when you're consuming any type of media, you need to be asking yourself, is this person credible? Or are they maybe a fake? Now, some of the questions you can keep in mind when you're seeing if someone or a source is credible is just check their standing in the community. Does this person have a long-standing background in whatever topic they're trying to teach about? Or did this person just kind of pop up randomly and is in it for a quick cash grab? Because that does happen. If someone does have a reputation within the community, it should be pretty easy to decide if that person's credible or not, right? A lot of people have written books, a lot of people might have certain degrees, a lot of people might hold titles such as high priest, high priestess within a certain tradition, and it should be very easy to fact check that. If they're presenting their credentials, usually they'll present the information to back that up. It could be a red flag if somebody's saying that they're experienced in something and they have nothing, no evidence at all to back that up. Reliability also ties into credibility. I mean, really everything in this chart ties into each other. A great way to gauge reliability is to, of course, take into account the author's ethos of that source, but also you want to think about bias. And everybody has bias. It is always constantly present in media. When you think about the media that you consume, think about the source, okay? The source of that media, right? Is the person credible? Do they associate with radical groups? Do they have radical ideas? Do they engage in spiritual psychosis, which we'll talk about later in the video? Do they have, in general, any sort of red flags that kind of make you want to step back? If those are present within their information they're presenting you, then it's probably not reliable. It's probably tainted in some way. Another thing with reliability is to analyze the purpose of the media you're consuming. Is the media for entertainment? Is it to teach or inform you of something? And I would say use your best gut judgment. For me, I can just tell when somebody's really into something that they're teaching or talking about, aside from the people who just want to make money and aren't actually caring about what they're talking about. With reliability too, this doesn't really translate 100% to the witchy space, but reliability in terms of scholarly articles, we talk about the sources being old versus being newer as in more relevant. That's not necessarily the case in our witchy space. I'm not by any means telling you that older sources or older books are not credible. But it is important to keep in mind if you're reading an older book or you're looking at an older source, is the information still accurate? When it comes to authority in the witchy space, one of the things that comes to mind, actually the first thing that comes to mind, is witchy publishing houses, right? They vet their authors and they vet the materials before they publish them to the public versus somebody who is self-published. And I'm not saying you can't be a great author with great information and be self-published, but I am saying that a publishing house typically holds more authority, more power. Also look out for people who are claiming to be the authority on a certain topic. You should always read as much as you can, learn from as many sources as you can, and not just limit your knowledge to one source or one person. That's very dangerous. If somebody's encouraging you to do that or claiming that they're the one sole authority on a certain topic in witchcraft, that is a major red flag. And of course, the accuracy of the information is always so important, and it takes like 2 seconds nowadays with the internet to verify that something is true. So if somebody is teaching you something and you want to verify that, take the time to do it because it can only help you. Now, in terms of unverified personal gnosis, that's not something that has to be verified, right? That's just people's personal opinions and their personal practice. But if somebody is presenting their unverified personal gnosis as fact, that's a huge red flag. And this is why it's important for books on witchcraft to have bibliographies or a section for references. That way you can go and double check that person's reference, cross-check it online if you want, but it's that person's way of saying, hey, this information is not my own. And if they're not doing that, and it's not UPG, then we get into plagiarism, which is a big issue. And that's going to wrap up this graphic because we have already talked about purpose. Again, just keep in mind what the purpose of something is. Is it to entertain you, inform you? Is that person gaining something from that? And no, it's not always bad. If somebody's making money off videos or somebody is making money off tarot readings or books, that's not a necessarily bad thing, right? People gotta make money, people gotta live their lives. But if you can tell that person is out to do something just because they want to make money and they're not credible and their information is not reliable or accurate, run for the hills. And I realize that most of these topics are plain and simple common sense, but honestly, you guys, you would be surprised by the fact that common sense isn't so common. And I know that sounds really mean. I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just honesty. Another topic we can sit here and talk about common sense wise is fire safety. Okay, this is like a huge one. I've seen people literally light altars on fire accidentally on TikTok. You should never leave something burning unattended because that can cause your whole house or wherever you live to go up in flames. Again, that's pretty common sense, but it happens. Also, do your due diligence and research things if you're into smoke cleansing, because some things can be toxic to you, toxic to your pets, toxic to your kids. In general, it's not great for you to breathe in smoke. Obviously, your pets and kids shouldn't be breathing that in either. And when it comes to crystals, please research whatever it is that you're working with, because some crystals are toxic. Some crystals cannot go into water. Some crystals cannot go into direct sunlight because it will change their color. Also, some crystal shapes like towers or spheres might even catch your room on fire if you have them next to an open window and the sun is reflecting off of them. There's a lot of things that you shouldn't do when it comes to crystals, and one of those things is grinding crystals up. Another thing with herbs, if you're using herbs or plants, keep in mind that some things are poisonous and some things are toxic. All right, our next point is a big one, and it's spiritual psychosis. I'm gonna have to put my phone down and talk about this one because this one is deep. It is crazy out there. Spiritual psychosis is at an all-time high, I feel like, on TikTok. And if you don't know what religious or spiritual psychosis is, it's basically when somebody is having a psychotic episode or there's signs of a psychotic break in somebody and they're deep diving into spirituality or religion. We recently had a solar eclipse, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I feel like it's been everywhere on TikTok. There were so many people talking about how it's the end of the world, right? The rapture is coming. And a lot of that is just spiritual psychosis. I mean, these people truly believe it. And a really sad example of this happened not that long ago after the eclipse. There was a woman, and she was a very spiritual person. She made TikToks. I believe she had a YouTube channel. Her name was Mystic Lipstick. She stabbed her husband. She pushed her 2 daughters out of a moving car and then wrecked into a tree, and she died. And before this incident, she was posting about the apocalypse is coming. People need to open their eyes. All this sort of red flag, crazy talk, fear mongering. Spiritual psychosis is so serious, and it can be easy to fall into, especially if you don't have that much experience on the path. So my biggest tip here is just to use your common sense and discernment. If something doesn't feel right, then don't engage with it. Most people who do the deep dive and end up getting spiritual psychosis are mostly drawn in by people fear mongering, right? Just like we talked about, the apocalypse is coming, right? The end of times is coming. That's a tactic that draws people in, right? They use fear as a way to draw people in. Another example of spiritual psychosis from TikTok, and again, back with the TikTok, right? If this isn't your sign to veg your sources, people, then I don't know what is. There was a girl not that long ago on TikTok, and she was in her van and she was singing, right? She had her little crystals and her dreads, some little white girl, and she's sitting there talking about how she healed her kidney infection with her mind. And yes, I believe in witchcraft, but let's just be honest, you have to be realistic to practice witchcraft. What I mean by that is you're not just gonna heal your kidney infection with the power of your mind. There's witchcraft and then there's science. Now, I use both personally, right? I use modern medicine. I go see my doctor when I need to go see my doctor, and I use witchcraft. I will never just sit here and use witchcraft to heal myself or do something crazy like that when I have access to modern medicine. This rhetoric online with spiritual psychosis and people thinking that modern medicine is bad and science is bad is such a big red flag, and it's a very harmful rhetoric, and if you're not using your discernment, you can fall into that. In a nutshell, just watch for signs of spiritual psychosis in people that you follow and in yourself as well. Sometimes you might have to step away from the craft, and that's fine. And sometimes you might find that somebody you used to really like, this has happened to me before on YouTube. There was a witch, I'm not gonna name her, I used to really like, and then she started doing deep dives into spiritual psychosis and talking about how Michael Jackson's songs were talking about the end of the world and that only certain people were like the elite beings, and just crazy stuff. And I'm gonna use this as a segue into our next topic, which is being honest about spiritual or religious trauma. I know it's easy to find witchcraft and be like so excited about it and want to jump in right away and want to learn all the things you can think of. But I'm gonna tell you from experience, if you're someone like myself, like this is, hey, me personally talking to you, I had severe religious trauma from the Christian church as a child that took me healing into my adult years to fully like develop as a witch. For me, this meant for a long time I had to research before I actually jumped in and practiced, because I still had a little bit of fear from the trauma that the church caused me. And unfortunately in this space, if you have trauma, sometimes that makes you the perfect target for people who are trying to scam you or people who are experiencing spiritual psychosis for themselves and want to involve you. The biggest takeaway from this bullet point, you guys, is just listen to yourself. If you feel like you can't jump into witchcraft right away and you need to read and you need to kind of see what it's about before you hop in, you owe that to yourself to take the time and to heal if you need to heal. For me personally, I had to do a lot of unlearning when it came to stereotypes, when it came to fear. And altogether, I could sit here and talk about that forever, but that's a different video. And if you want to hear more about my journey coming from Christianity to witchcraft, I'll have to post that video sometime on my channel, but this is not the video. Another quick bullet point that I want to talk about really quick is just scammers and fakes. I've gotten so many messages on Instagram or TikToks where people are like, hey, I'm a psychic and your guides have reached out to me and your ancestors have given me a message, and to get this message you have to pay me $50. Anytime anybody is messaging you and asking for money, it should automatically be a red flag. Unfortunately, within this space, there are a lot of scammers and scams going around. Another one that comes to my mind is during TikToks, you know, you'll get those random videos that pop up. I always get ones that are like, this reading is meant to you. If you don't like this TikTok and share it and use this sound, something bad is going to happen to you within 24 hours. That's literally not a thing. That's just a scammer trying to use fear to get you to do something or buy a reading from them. It's absolutely ridiculous and annoying. Unfortunately, there are also a lot of fakes, and what I mean by fakes is a lot of people will take your favorite witchy content creators and make a fake profile and reach out to you. And some people are just fake in general, meaning that they have no idea what they're talking about and they're totally full of crap and they're over here trying to teach you things. So just be wary of people like that. Alright, now I'm going to talk about how to actually learn witchcraft, which is going to be the second part of the video. So when it comes to learning witchcraft, and this is me speaking from somebody who has experience teaching and somebody who has experience learning witchcraft. And my suggestion is that you treat it as an academic process, because it really is no different than learning a subject in school. The first thing is to learn at your own pace, right? You can't just jump in and learn every single thing. You know yourself best, and this might look like for you learning one topic at a time. And however long you spend on that topic is completely up to you. For me, when I first learned about witchcraft, the way that I got in was through tarot cards. So I spent some time focusing on divination and specifically tarot card reading before jumping into other things. This also ties into the first part of the video about being realistic. Witchcraft is not some sort of quick fix type thing. You can't just come into the space, light a candle, and become a billionaire, all right? I'm not gonna say that might not ever happen, but like, let's just be realistic here. It's probably not gonna happen. Probably the most important thing I can tell you about learning at your own pace is that it's your own pace. And so don't compare yourself to people that you see online. Don't compare yourself to your friends. Don't compare yourself to literally anybody. Just focus on yourself. With learning at your own pace too, I want you to think about scaffolding. And if you don't know what scaffolding is, that's when us as teachers, we build certain concepts off of each other. That way you don't just jump into something that you're completely unprepared for, right? You're slowly building your way up. I'm gonna throw another graphic up here on the screen. I know that you guys are probably tired of graphics, but I can't help it because my background's in teaching. All right, so the graphic I'm showing you is called the Learning Pyramid. This is from Education's Corner if you wanna look it up online and find it for yourself. And I know that this is probably a little bit confusing to look at, so I'm gonna go ahead and break it down for us. This pyramid itself refers to the process of learning. So you have different modes of learning, right? Auditory will be people who prefer to hear, right? Learning through hearing. That would be your lectures. That would be if somebody's reading a book to you. You also have the visual mode, which is people who like to look at videos, like to look at graphics, charts. Then you have kinesthetic learning, and that is learning through doing, learning through movement. Now, aside from those three modes of learning, you also have passive learning and active learning. Passive means that you're not super engaged in the learning, and active obviously means that you are. Aside from that, you'll see in the pyramid that there's numbers and there's things listed like reading, lecture, audiovisual, demonstration, discussion, practice doing, and teaching others. What this pyramid is showing us is that things like lectures and reading are passive in nature, right? You're just sitting there listening, you're not really engaged, and you typically don't learn best that way. And I know that's kind of crazy to think about because I'm a person who really likes learning from hearing other people talk, but it's true. Now, good educators know that the way to learn best in any subject is to use all of the above in the pyramid and not just one. I will say that in our witchy space, most people learn from reading and lectures, right? It's really easy to pick up a book and read and learn what you need to know. It's really easy to turn on a YouTube video or go to a lecture, go to a witchy podcast and learn about things. But those two methods of learning are rated relatively low and passive on the pyramid. And a way that you can make these active and learn more, if you are a person who really enjoys auditory learning, which I am, I love to hear people talk, you can bridge this from being a passive activity to an active activity by journaling, by taking notes, also just by engaging in conversation, right? Talking to people in the comments section. If it's a live lecture, asking questions. Another thing that I'm going to recommend to you guys is to go and see demonstration videos. There's a ton of demonstration videos on YouTube for certain spell works. You can even go to a demonstration or a class that uses demonstration at your local witchy store. Most witchy stores have classes that do showcase demonstrations so you can learn, right? Kinesthetic, that's that hands-on. They might even allow you guys to learn hands-on, which is always a great option. I also want you to notice at the pyramid where it says 75%, that is your actual practice, right? Doing your spell work, doing work in the witchy space in general. And a lot of people on here will say, right, read before you do anything, read before you do anything. And of course, follow the tips I have listed in part 1. But when you feel like you're ready, please by all means start doing witchcraft. Okay, witchcraft or spell work is called work because it requires work on your part. This is why I feel like this graphic is perfect for talking about this subject, because you can clearly see that just listening to lectures or just reading is not doing much for you. And I'll tell you right now, even though I've been on this path for many, many years, I am a forever learner. Right? I'm always learning new things and I'm always practicing. People really weren't lying when they said practice makes perfect. Also at the very end of the pyramid, the most active thing that you can do to showcase what you have learned is to teach other people what you have learned. And I know that not everybody is comfortable with doing that, and that's totally fine, but what this graphic is saying is that's the best way for you to showcase what you've learned is by teaching others. Obviously, you really have to know your material and know your stuff before you go out and teach others, and by no means am I telling you to go start a class or go start a witchy course. That's not what I'm saying. However, if you do feel comfortable enough and you do want to push yourself to grow as a witch, I think that there's a lot of ways you can go about that can really help you. One great way to go about this is to start a TikTok or a YouTube channel and to teach others whatever it is that you want. Let's say, for example, you've done a candle spell 100 times and it's worked so great for you and you just want to share it with somebody else. Go ahead and share it. If you're not really comfortable with being on video, that's totally fine too, right? You can teach your other witchy friends. It doesn't have to be where the whole world can view you. It can just be in private conversation where you're going back and forth with somebody and learning from each other. Something that you can do, which I think totally enriches your practice as a witch, is engaging with other people. And if you don't have witchy friends in real life, there's numerous ways you can do that online. And my videos, I always say, if you have something to say, you can share it in the comment section, because a lot of people will talk to each other that way. There's also Reddit threads for witches. There's certain apps for witches like Amino. Now, I know this video was probably overwhelming and there was a lot of information given, but the biggest takeaway that I want you to have from this section and looking at that pyramid of learning is not to limit yourself into one certain section of that pyramid. And I know this can be very hard, okay? I'm a reader and I love to listen to other people talk, but I also don't limit myself to those two modes of learning. And it's totally fine to have a preference, like I mentioned mine, but it's not okay to just stay put into a little box and expect to learn and grow. That's not gonna happen if you're in the same place. It takes getting out of that place and getting into other modes of learning to fully learn something. With that said, I think I've given you a lot of information to think about, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. I really enjoyed making this video, and I know in the past my channel has focused more on hauls and room tours and simple things like that, but I really enjoy making educational content, and so I'm going to try to start making demonstration videos or just videos like this where I sit down and talk about a certain topic in witchcraft. I'm gonna stop rambling now. I hope that everybody watching this is having a great day. If nobody's told you, I love you, and I will see you guys in the next video.